Failure had a scent. It smelled like antiseptic cold leather and the untouched fruit snacks in his son's backpack. For Alexander Sterling, it was the air he breathed, the ghost that sat beside him in his $250,000 Bentley. He stared through the tinted windshield at the unforgiving Chicago skyline, a collection of steel and glass giants he had helped build, yet all he felt was small. The automated doors of the Ann and Robert H. Lurie Children's Hospital slid open, spitting them back out into the raw November wind. It was a vicious, biting wind, the kind that whipped off Lake Michigan and seemed to enjoy finding the cracks in your soul. Alex zipped up his son's parka, his movements practiced and gentle, as if the 6-year-old boy in the wheelchair were made of spun glass. "All right, Leo, let's get you home, buddy." Leo didn't answer. He never did anymore. His blue eyes, once the brightest things in any room, were fixed on some point beyond the horizon. They were the eyes of a passenger, not a participant. 214 days. Alex counted them every morning. 214 days since a split-second glance at a phone, the screech of tires on rain-slicked pavement, and the deafening silence that followed. The doctors had a name for it. Functional paralysis, rooted in psychogenic trauma, a $10 phrase that meant his son's body was fine, but his mind had built a prison and thrown away the key. As Alex maneuvered the custom-built, lightweight wheelchair toward the curb where his driver waited, a voice cut through the city's howl. "His legs aren't dead." The voice was quiet, but clear, startlingly calm. Alex stopped, his hand tightening on the wheelchair's handle. He turned to see a girl standing near a concrete planter. She couldn't have been more than 11, a slip of a thing in an oversized coat that had seen better decades. Her dark skin was a stark contrast to the gray bleakness of the afternoon, and her eyes were ancient. They held a stillness that didn't belong in a child. "Excuse me?" Alex's tone was sharp, a defense mechanism he'd perfected in boardrooms. The girl took a small step forward, not intimidated. "His legs, they aren't dead. They're just sleeping." She tilted her head, her gaze fixed on Leo, not on the man whose net worth could buy this entire city block. "I think I can help wake them up." A bitter laugh escaped Alex's lips. He had heard it all. Faith healers, mystics, charlatans peddling miracle cures from every corner of the internet. They all smelled money and desperation. He pulled out his wallet, a reflex. "Here's 100, kid. Go buy yourself a hot meal." He tried to turn away, but the girl didn't move. She didn't even look at the bill. "I don't want your money," she said, her voice still impossibly steady. "I want your trust." Something in her directness, in the sheer audacity of her claim, chipped at the wall of cynicism Alex had built around his heart. He looked from her worn-out sneakers to his son's vacant stare. He had consulted with neurologists from Johns Hopkins, flown in specialists from Germany. He had spent millions on therapies that involved virtual reality, hydropools, and robotic exoskeletons. None of it had earned him so much as a flicker of a toe. "You have no idea what you're talking about," he snapped, the frustration of months boiling over. He pushed the wheelchair toward the waiting car, the driver holding the door open. "I know what I see," the girl called after him. "I see a boy who's scared to touch the ground because he remembers the last time it betrayed him." Alex froze, his hand on the car door. Betrayed him? The word struck him like a physical blow. It was so specific, so terrifyingly accurate. That was it, wasn't it? The world had violently, suddenly proven itself to be an unsafe place. Leo hadn't just been in an accident. He'd been betrayed by the fundamental laws of physics, by the father who was supposed to protect him. He turned back, his face a mask of conflict. "Who are you?" "My name is Samara," she said. "But my friends call me Sam." He stood there for a long moment, the wind tearing at his expensive suit. The city roared around them. Sirens, horns, the symphony of indifference. For a fleeting second, he saw not a child on a street corner, but a lifeline. It was insane. It was illogical. It was the only new idea he'd heard in 214 days. "Get in the car," he said, the words tasting like madness on his tongue. He didn't know what he was doing. He only knew that doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result was the definition of insanity. Maybe, just maybe, A different kind of insanity was exactly what he needed. Samara didn't hesitate. She walked to the other side of the Bentley and slid into the plush leather seat as if she belonged there. As the car pulled silently away from the curb, Alex watched the hospital shrink in the rearview mirror. He felt a sliver of something he hadn't felt in a long time, not hope. That was too dangerous a word. It was just possibility. A crack in the endless gray. Later that night, long after Leo was asleep, Alex sat in his home office, a sterile glass box, overlooking a black and glittering Lake Michigan. The silence of the penthouse was heavier than any noise. He replayed the scene in his head. The girl's quiet confidence, her strange and insightful words. Was he a fool? A desperate father clutching at the most ridiculous of straws? His phone buzzed on the polished mahogany desk, shattering the quiet. The caller ID was a name that made his stomach clench. Marcus Thorne. His father-in-law. He let it ring 3 times before answering, steeling himself. Marcus. The voice on the other end was cold, precise, and held all the warmth of a legal document. Alexander, I trust you received the email from my attorney. Alex's blood ran cold. I've been busy, Marcus. Make time. Thorne's voice cut back, devoid of any sympathy. I'm flying into Chicago next week. My lawyers have the custody paperwork finalized. We're going before a judge. There was a pause, heavy with menace. You had your chance to fix this. You failed. You're not fit to care for him, Alex. I won't let you break what's left of my grandson. The line went dead. Alex stared at the phone, his heart hammering against his ribs. The walls of his glass office suddenly felt like they were closing in. The vague threat had just become a ticking clock. His despair, once a slow-burning fire, was now a raging inferno. He was out of time, out of options, and out of respectable ideas. All he had left was a whisper of a promise from a strange, sad-eyed girl who believed sleeping legs could be woken up. It wasn't a plan, it was a prayer in the dark. And right now, it was the only thing he had. Sleep was a luxury Alexander Sterling could no longer afford. He spent the hours before dawn, not in his bed, but in the cold glow of his office computer, watching ghosts. On the screen, a 5-year-old Leo, all blonde curls and boundless energy, chased a soccer ball across a sun-drenched lawn. He laughed, a bright, musical sound that now felt like a phantom limb of a memory. Alex could feel it. But it wasn't there. He clicked to another video. Leo, on his shoulders, at a street festival, face sticky with cotton candy. Alive. So incredibly alive. He closed the laptop with a sharp snap, the silence rushing back in. Marcus was right about one thing. He had failed. He'd thrown money at the problem like it was a fire, hiring the best minds, the most advanced technicians. They had all treated Leo's body like a broken machine, running diagnostics, testing circuits, rebooting systems. But Leo wasn't a machine. He was a little boy whose world had shattered, and no one, not a single expert, had bothered to ask his soul what was wrong. They were treating the symptom, not the source. They're just sleeping. The girl's words echoed in the sterile quiet. It was a preposterous, unscientific thought, and yet, it was the only one that felt remotely true. By sunrise, the decision was made. It wasn't a choice born of logic, but of its absolute absence. When you've exhausted every rational option, the only path left is the irrational one. He left a note for his housekeeper, a trusted woman who had been with the family for years, instructing her to look after Leo. Then, he took the Bentley himself, leaving his driver behind. He found her exactly where he'd left her, as if she were a permanent fixture of the hospital's grim landscape. She was sitting on the same concrete planter, tucked into her oversized coat, engrossed in a worn paperback. As Alex approached, he could read the faded title, The Body's Echo. Trauma and Somatic Memory. It wasn't a children's book. She looked up as his shadow fell over her, her expression unreadable. She showed no surprise, as if she had been expecting him. I spent the night thinking about what you said, Alex began, skipping the pleasantries. He was a man of transactions, And this felt like the most important negotiation of his life. About his legs. Sleeping. Where did you learn that? Samara marked her page with a stray leaf before closing the book. My mom. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of a complete history. She was a therapist, the kind that didn't just use words. She used touch, music, nature. She believed that when something terrible happens, the story gets trapped in your body, not just in your head. Alex felt a prickle of something he hadn't expected. Intrigue. This wasn't the rambling of a street corner mystic. It was a philosophy, however unconventional. And she taught you? I was her helper, Sam said, a flicker of a sad smile touching her lips. I carried her bag. I watched. I listened. She used to say the body remembers what the mind wants to forget. To heal, you don't force the memory out. You have to make the body feel safe enough to let it go. Safe enough to let it go. The phrase resonated deep within Alex, in the place where his own guilt was trapped. He hadn't felt safe since the accident. How could Leo? I want to hire you, Alex said, the words tasting foreign. He was used to acquiring companies, not consulting with 11-year-olds. Samara's gaze was unwavering. I don't work for hire. A contract, then. A trial period, he countered, falling back on the language he knew. 1 week. Let me see what you can do. If there is any progress, any at all, I will set up a trust for you. Education, housing, anything you need for the rest of your life. He expected her to be dazzled, to see the golden ticket he was offering. Instead, she just looked at him, her ancient eyes weighing him. And if it doesn't work, then we walk away, Alex said, the familiar taste of failure already on his tongue. And I'll still give you enough to get you off the street. She was silent for a long moment, the wind whipping a strand of hair across her face. He could see the calculation in her eyes, but it wasn't about money. It was about something else. Okay, she finally said. 1 week. But I have conditions. Name them. First, she said, her voice firm, no hospitals, no white coats, no machines that beep. He's had enough of that. It's a place of pain for him now. Alex nodded. That made sense. Second, she continued, no doctors watching over my shoulder, taking notes, and judging. Just you, me, and him. He hesitated. The thought of proceeding without medical supervision went against every instinct, but his instincts had led him to a dead end. Agreed. And third, she said, her eyes finding his, we don't do it here. She gestured vaguely at the concrete and steel surrounding them. We need a place where he can breathe. A place with grass and trees. A place where the ground feels like a friend, not an enemy. Alex thought for a moment, picturing the city's layout. A manicured park. A place of life. Lincoln Park, he said. By the conservatory. It's quiet there on weekdays. Samara considered this, then gave a single decisive nod. Lincoln Park. Tomorrow. Noon. She stood up, pulling her worn book close to her chest like a shield. Don't be late. Waking someone up takes time. Without another word, she turned and walked away, disappearing into the flow of the city, leaving Alexander Sterling standing alone on the sidewalk, a desperate bargain, struck with a child who spoke of sleeping souls, and the memory of the body. He had no idea if he'd just made the most foolish decision of his life, or if he'd finally found the key to the prison his son was trapped in. Lincoln Park in late autumn was a canvas of muted golds and browns, a quiet defiance against the encroaching gray of winter. Alex pushed Leo's wheelchair along a paved path, the air crisp and clean, smelling of damp earth instead of sterile hallways. He felt exposed, vulnerable, stripped of the armor of his driver and the fortress of his penthouse. It was just him, his silent son, and an agreement made in desperation. Sam was already there, sitting on a worn wooden bench near a sprawling oak tree, its last leaves clinging stubbornly to the branches. She wasn't looking at them. Her attention was on a small canvas bag at her feet. She looked up only when they were a few feet away, her gaze going straight to Leo. Hi, Leo, she said, her voice soft, devoid of the forced cheerfulness that so many therapists used. It was just a simple, respectful greeting. Leo's eyes flickered in her direction for a fraction of a second before returning to their vacant middle distance. Alex parked the wheelchair on the grass, a few feet from the bench, his arms crossed tightly against his chest. He felt like a spectator at a play he didn't understand. "So what's the plan?" he asked, his voice tight. "You gonna wave a magic wand?" Sam ignored his sarcasm. She unzipped her canvas bag and began laying out its contents on the grass. Not on a sterile blanket, but directly on the earth. The items were strange, almost comically simple. A long, soft feather from what looked like a hawk. A handful of smooth gray stones, warmed by the faint sun. A small wooden box with a slit in the top. A tin of cocoa butter. "Magic is just science we don't understand yet," she said, her focus entirely on her task. She knelt on the grass next to Leo's wheelchair, her movements unhurried. "Can I see your feet, Leo?" she asked, speaking directly to him. Alex tensed, ready to intervene. Therapists had tried this before sensory stimulation. It had always resulted in nothing. But Sam's approach was different. She wasn't a clinician performing a procedure. She was a child, inviting another to play. She gently slipped off Leo's sneakers and socks, her touch light and respectful. She held one of his small, pale feet in her hands for a moment, simply warming it. Then she picked up the feather. "Okay, Leo," she whispered, as if sharing a secret. "We're going on an adventure. Your toes are a team of explorers. Right now, they're in a quiet forest." She began to trace the feather ever so lightly along the sole of his foot, from his heel to his toes. A little breeze is rustling the leaves. "Can you feel the tickle?" Alex watched, his breath held. Leo's expression didn't change. His foot remained limp. Disappointment, cold and familiar, began to seep into Alex's bones. Sam didn't seem discouraged. She set the feather down and picked up one of the smooth gray stones. "Now the explorers have found a path of smooth river rocks." She continued her story, pressing the stone gently into different parts of his foot. "Each one is a different shape. This one is round. This one is flat. They're leading to a hidden cave." She worked for 20 minutes, moving from the feather to the stones, from one foot to the other, her voice a low, constant murmur, weaving a tale of explorers and hidden worlds. She never asked Leo to move. She never demanded a response. She only invited him to feel, to imagine. She rubbed the cocoa butter into his skin, the scent of chocolate filling the air. She opened the small wooden box, and a faint sound of ocean waves, a gentle, rhythmic shushing, drifted out. It was mesmerizing. Alex found his own tension easing, his crossed arms loosening. He was so focused on the quiet ritual that he almost missed it. Sam was using a cool, damp leaf, tracing the arch of Leo's left foot. "And now," she murmured, "the explorers are crossing a cool stream." Leo's smallest toe, the one on the outside, gave a tiny, almost imperceptible twitch. Alex's heart stopped. It wasn't a voluntary movement. It was a reflex, a ghost of a signal from a long-dormant nerve. But it was something. He stared, unblinking, waiting for it to happen again. It didn't. But it had happened. He hadn't imagined it. Sam saw it too. A tiny, knowing smile touched her lips. But she didn't break her rhythm or draw attention to it. She simply finished her story, gently placing Leo's foot back on the wheelchair's footrest. She looked up at Alex, her ancient eyes meeting his. "See?" she said softly. "The explorers are still in there. They're just a little lost." Alex couldn't speak. He just stared at his son's foot, at the toe that had moved. A single tiny twitch that felt more significant than any multi-million-dollar corporate merger he had ever closed. It was a signal from a distant shore, a proof of life. He finally found his voice, a rough whisper. What was that?" "That was a memory," Sam said, packing her simple tools back into her bag. His body remembers what grass and a cool breeze feel like. You just have to remind it, gently. The hope he had been so afraid of began to unfurl in his chest, fragile but insistent. He looked at Samara, this strange, wise child with a canvas bag of rocks and feathers, and felt a seismic shift in his understanding of the world. You should stay with us, he said, the words coming out before he could second-guess them. At my place. I have a guest suite. It would be easier. For the sessions. He was offering a room in his gilded cage, but it felt like he was the one asking for sanctuary. Samara looked from Alex's desperate, hopeful face to Leo, who, for the first time in a long time, didn't seem to be staring through the world, but at it. The focus of his eyes was still soft, but it was there. She hesitated for only a moment, then gave another one of her small, decisive nods. Okay, she said. For the explorers, the guest suite in Alexander Sterling's penthouse was larger than most Chicago apartments. It had floor-to-ceiling windows, offering a panoramic view of the city, a king-sized bed with sheets that felt like water, and a bathroom carved from Italian marble. For Samara, who had been sleeping in shelters and on friends' couches, it should have felt like a palace. Instead, it felt like a museum, beautiful, silent, and cold. For 2 days, a fragile routine formed. Each afternoon, she and Leo would find a quiet space, sometimes on the thick rug in the living room, sometimes on the private terrace overlooking the lake, and she would continue her work. She never repeated the same story. One day, his feet were spaceships landing on different planets. A shag rug was a grassy world, the cool tile a crystal planet. The next, his hands were deep-sea divers, discovering treasure, polished stones in a bowl of warm water. Alex watched from a distance, a silent, anxious ghost in his own home. He saw more twitches, a slight flex of an ankle, a curl of the fingers. They were small, involuntary sparks, but they were consistent. He started to believe. He allowed the dangerous seed of hope to take root. The illusion shattered on Thursday afternoon. The private elevator opened directly into the foyer, and out stepped Marcus Thorne. He was a tall man, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit that probably cost more than Alex's first car. He carried himself with the unshakable authority of a man who had never lost a legal battle. His sharp, intelligent eyes swept the room, missing nothing. His lips pressed into a thin line of disapproval. Alexander, he said, his voice as cold as the November wind. He hadn't called ahead. He never did. It was a power play, a reminder of who was in charge. His gaze landed on the scene in the living room. Samara, kneeling on the floor beside Leo's wheelchair, gently rolling a small textured ball under Leo's calf. What? Marcus said. Each word a drop of ice. Is this? Alex felt his blood run cold. Marcus, I didn't know you were coming. Clearly, Marcus replied, striding forward. He ignored Alex, his focus entirely on his grandson and the stranger at his feet. Leo, who is this girl? Leo, who'd been relaxed and focused on Sam's gentle ministrations, flinched as if struck. His entire body went rigid. The faint light that had started to return to his eyes was extinguished, replaced by the familiar, vacant stare. He retreated so far inside himself that it was like watching a turtle pull into its shell. She's a friend, Marcus, Alex said, stepping between him and the children. She's helping. Marcus let out a short, incredulous laugh. Helping? By performing what, exactly? Some back alley voodoo? I just got off the phone with Dr. Albright. He tells me you've canceled all of Leo's physical therapy sessions. For this? He gestured dismissively at Samara, who had risen to her feet, her expression calm but her hands clenched into small fists at her sides. Her methods are unconventional, but they're working, Alex insisted, his voice rising. Working? Marcus's voice was a whip crack. Look at him, Alex. He's terrified. You bring a stranger, a child from the street, into your home and let her experiment on my grandson? Have you lost your mind? He took a step closer, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper. You broke him once with your carelessness. I will not stand by and watch you shatter what's left of him with your foolishness. The hearing is set for Tuesday. My lawyers will have a field day with this. A field day? The air crackled, with a tension so thick it was hard to breathe. Samara slowly backed away, trying to make herself small, to disappear. But the damage was done. The safe space she had so carefully constructed around Leo had been violently torn apart. The argument raged for another 10 minutes, a brutal storm of accusations and recriminations. When Marcus finally turned and stormed back to the elevator, a silent vortex of fury, the room was left in a state of devastation. But the real damage wasn't in the shouted words. It was in the silence that followed. Later, Alex found Leo in his room, staring out the window. The small, responsive boy from an hour ago was gone. In his place was the hollow shell from the hospital. Alex knelt beside him. "Leo? Buddy?" No response. He tried to coax him, to talk to him. Nothing. He called for Samara. She came in, her face pale, and knelt down. She tried to take Leo's hand, but he pulled it away. She spoke to him in the same soft, storytelling voice, but the words fell into a void. The connection was broken. The progress, all of it, had vanished. The twitches, the sparks, the faint light in his eyes, all gone. Marcus had been a wrecking ball, and he had demolished everything. That night, Alex sat in his office, the hope he had nurtured now a bitter ash in his mouth. He was a fool. Marcus was right. He had risked his son's well-being on a fantasy. A desperate whim. He was an unfit father, and on Tuesday, a judge was going to make it official. He picked up the phone to call Dr. Albright and reschedule Leo's therapy appointments. He would tell Samara in the morning that the experiment was over. It was time to surrender. The bottle of Macallan 25 was Alex's last line of defense against the crushing weight of failure. He sat in his cavernous office. The city lights a glittering, mocking tapestry below, and let the amber liquid burn a path down his throat. He had already drafted the email to his lawyer, a prelude to surrender. He had rehearsed the speech he would give Samara, a quiet, apologetic dismissal. It was over. The flicker of hope had been an illusion, a cruel trick of the light. The office door opened with a soft click. He didn't have to look up to know who it was. The housekeeper had gone home hours ago. Leo was asleep. It was the girl. "You should be sleeping," he said, his voice rough with whiskey and defeat. He swirled the liquor in his glass, watching the light fracture through it. Samara didn't answer right away. She walked further into the room, her worn sneakers silent on the polished hardwood floor. She stopped a few feet from his desk, a small, resolute figure in the cavern of his self-pity. "It's not Leo's fault," she said, her voice clear and cutting through the alcoholic haze. "I never said it was," Alex slurred, taking another sip. "No," she countered, her gaze unflinching. "You didn't have to. You're shouting it. The problem isn't that your father-in-law came here today. The problem isn't that Leo got scared. The problem is you." The accusation hung in the air, sharp and direct. It pierced through his defenses in a way Marcus Thorne's blustering never could. "You think I don't know that?" Alex shot back, slamming the glass down on the desk. "I was there. I was driving. It's all my fault." "That's not what I'm talking about," Sam said, her voice impossibly calm. "I'm not talking about the accident. I'm talking about right now. Your guilt, it's like a poison gas in this house. It fills every room. You walk around like a man already in prison, and Leo feels it. He feels you punishing yourself. And he thinks it's his fault. He thinks he's the reason you're so sad." Her words hit him with the force of a physical blow. He stared at her, this child who saw him with a clarity no adult ever had. She wasn't just talking about his grief. She was talking about the corrosive, selfish nature of his wallowing. He had been so consumed by his own failure that he hadn't realized he was drowning his son in it too. "A scared animal doesn't come out of its burrow if it smells a predator nearby," Sam continued, her voice softening slightly. "And your fear smells like a predator to him. He won't get better until you do." The dam broke. A sob, raw and ugly, tore its way out of Alex's chest. It was a sound he hadn't made since he was a boy, a sound of complete and utter brokenness. The carefully constructed facade of Alexander Sterling, the titan of industry, shattered into a million pieces. He buried his face in his hands, and the confession poured out of him, not in a torrent, but in ragged, choked fragments. "I was looking at my phone," he whispered, the words tasting like acid. "Just for a second. An email alert. I looked down, and when I looked up, the light had changed. It was my fault. All of it." He confessed the sleepless nights, the terror of the silence in the car after the crash, the way he flinched every time he heard a siren. He laid bare the ugly, festering wound of his guilt, the one he had hidden from his therapists, his friends, and most of all, from himself. Through it all, Samara just stood there. She didn't offer platitudes. She didn't say, "It's not your fault." She didn't try to fix it. She simply listened. She bore witness. Her quiet presence was a container for his pain, allowing it to be seen without judgment for the very first time. When the storm of tears finally subsided, Alex was left hollowed out, exhausted, but lighter. He looked up at Sam, his eyes red-rimmed, and saw not a child, but a healer. "What do I do?" he asked. The question raw and genuine. "You forgive yourself," she said simply. "Not all at once. But you start. You stop being a ghost in your own home. You let him see you, the real you, the sad you, the trying you, not just the perfect, pretending to be okay dad." He took a deep, shuddering breath. It felt like the first real breath he'd taken in 214 days. The path forward was still terrifying and uncertain, but for the first time, it didn't feel impossible. The enemy wasn't Marcus Thorne. It wasn't the ghost of the accident. The enemy was the wall he had built inside himself. He stood up, walked around the desk, and deleted the email to his lawyer. He poured the rest of the expensive whiskey down the sink in his private bar. He turned back to Samara, his resolve hardening into something new. Not hope, but determination. "We're not stopping," he said, his voice clear and steady for the first time all night. "We're going to continue. But you were right. This time, I'm not just going to watch. I'm in." He finally understood. To heal his son, he had to be willing to heal himself. The journey wasn't just for Leo anymore. It was for both of them. The shift in the penthouse was palpable. The heavy, oppressive silence was replaced by something softer, more tentative. It was the sound of effort. Alex no longer watched from the sidelines like a nervous warden. He was on the floor, an active participant in the strange, quiet world Samara created. He learned to tell stories, his deep voice clumsy at first, but gaining confidence. He described Leo's toes as a team of elite mountain climbers, scaling the treacherous peaks of a corduroy pillow. He sat cross-legged, helping Sam hold a large, shallow basin of warm water, while Leo's hands, the submarines, explored for smooth sea glass marbles at the bottom. Leo responded to the change. The wall around him, while not gone, became translucent. He started making eye contact with his father again, brief at first, then longer. One afternoon, while Alex was making a funny voice for a crab, his own hand scuttling over Leo's leg, a small smile touched Leo's lips. It was the first real smile Alex had seen in 7 months. And it felt like the sun breaking through the clouds. With this fragile progress came a new sense of responsibility for Alex. Samara was more than a therapist. She was becoming family. He couldn't let her drift back into the anonymity of the streets when this was over. He wanted to give her a future. That started with the basics. "Sam," he said one evening as she sketched in a notebook at the kitchen island, "I want to get you properly enrolled in school, and for that, and for the trust fund I promised you, I need to get your official records sorted out. I'll need your mother's full name and any other information you have. My lawyers can handle the rest." Samara froze, her pencil hovering over the page. A shadow passed over her face, a familiar guardedness he hadn't seen in days. "It's complicated," she said quietly. "I have the best lawyers in Chicago," Alex assured her gently. "They can handle complicated." She hesitated for a long moment, then took a deep breath. Her name was Dr. Ania Jones. The name didn't register at first. It was just a name. "Dr. Jones," Alex repeated, typing it into a note on his phone. "And where did she work? A hospital? A private practice?" "A clinic," Sam said, her voice barely a whisper. "A community clinic on the south side. It was called Riverwood." This time, the name hit Alex like a physical jolt. Riverwood. A cold dread, sharp and acidic, snaked its way up his spine. He kept his face neutral, a mask of calm he'd perfected over years of high-stakes negotiations. "Thank you, Sam. That's very helpful." He waited until she had gone to her room before he walked back to his office, his heart hammering a frantic, panicked rhythm against his ribs. He sat at his desk, his hands shaking slightly as he typed a name into the secure server for Sterling Corpor's acquisitions. Archive. Riverwood. The search results loaded instantly. Project Goldfinch. Date: 3 years prior. A multi-million-dollar land acquisition deal for a prime parcel of real estate in the rapidly gentrifying South Side. The plan: demolish the existing low-rise commercial building and construct a luxury condominium tower with river views. The Goldfinch Tower. One of his most profitable projects to date. He clicked on the annexed file containing the list of tenants from the old building. His eyes scanned down the list of small businesses: a laundromat, a bodega, a law office, and there it was. Suite 2B. Riverwood Holistic Wellness Clinic. Lessee. Dr. Anya Jones. The room began to spin. He read on, his dread mounting with every word. The file contained copies of formal correspondence, eviction notices, legal challenges filed by the tenants. He found a passionate, articulate letter signed by Dr. Anya Jones, pleading with the faceless corporation to reconsider, detailing the vital services the clinic provided to an underserved community: mental health services, trauma therapy, addiction counseling. It was a lifeline for hundreds of people. He found the response from his own legal department. A form letter, cold and clinical, rejecting the appeal and citing the legally binding terms of the acquisition. The final document was a demolition permit. He leaned back in his chair, the air stolen from his lungs. The story pieced itself together in his mind with horrifying clarity. His company, his ambition, his relentless pursuit of profit had bulldozed this woman's life's work. They had ripped the heart out of her community, and in doing so had destroyed her. He remembered Samara's simple, devastating words. My mom got sick. It wasn't a mystery illness. It was a sickness born of stress, loss, and heartbreak. He had caused it. The irony was so profound, so cosmically cruel, that he almost laughed. He had been so consumed by the guilt of one single, catastrophic mistake, a car accident, that he had been blind to the thousand smaller, colder, more calculated cruelties he had committed in the name of business. The boy he was trying to save was the son of the man who had destroyed the life of the girl who was saving him. It wasn't a debt he could repay with a trust fund or a fancy education. It was a ghost that sat at the heart of their fragile, healing world. An invisible debt of catastrophic proportions. And he had no idea how to even begin to pay it back. The weight of his discovery settled on Alex like a physical shroud. For 2 days, he moved through the penthouse like a man haunted, the knowledge of his complicity a toxic secret. He watched Samara interact with Leo, her patience and empathy a constant, burning indictment of his own past actions. How could he look her in the eye? How could he accept this gift of healing from the very person whose life he had helped unravel? The day of the custody hearing arrived like a death sentence. Marcus Thorne appeared at the penthouse an hour before they were due in court, flanked by a sharp-suited lawyer who looked like a shark in human skin. They were there for Leo. It's time, Alexander, Marcus said, his voice devoid of emotion. Let's not make this more difficult than it needs to be. But he was speaking to a different man. The Alex of a week ago, broken, guilty, and ready to surrender, was gone. In his place stood a man who had stared into the abyss of his own failings and had found not despair, but a quiet, unshakable resolve. We're not going to court, Marcus, Alex said, his voice calm and even. Marcus raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. Don't be a fool. The judge is waiting. You don't have a choice. I'm not talking about a choice. I'm talking about a fact, Alex replied. He stepped aside, revealing the living room behind him. Leo was sitting on the floor, not in his wheelchair. He was leaning against a large ottoman, his legs stretched out in front of him. He and Samara were building a tower of colorful wooden blocks, as Marcus and his lawyer watched, dumbfounded. Leo reached forward, his back straight, and placed a red block on the very top of the swaying structure. The movement was deliberate, controlled. He's been doing more every day, Alex said softly. He's laughing again, Marcus. He's reconnecting. The shark-like lawyer cleared his throat, sensing a shift in the current. A minor improvement in motor skills is hardly a reason to halt these proceedings. The child still requires constant, professional care. He's getting professional care, Alex shot back, his eyes locking with Marcus's. He's getting a kind of care that your specialists and my money couldn't buy. It's called compassion. It's called patience. It's called making a child feel safe in his own skin. He walked over to Leo and knelt beside him. Hey, buddy. Can you show Grandpa what we practiced? Leo looked from his father to Samara, who gave him a small, encouraging nod. He placed his hands flat on the floor, pushed his hips up, and got onto his hands and knees. It was a slow, shaky process, but he did it. He crawled 3 feet across the plush rug to where his favorite stuffed lion lay, a feat of coordinated movement that would have been unthinkable a week ago. The room was silent. The lawyer's jaw was slack. Marcus Thorne stared, his face a mixture of shock and disbelief. He saw his grandson, not as a broken doll, but as a boy who was fighting his way back. The hearing can be postponed, Marcus said finally, his voice strained. The unshakable authority in it cracked. We'll reassess. He turned and left without another word, his lawyer trailing behind him like a confused pilot fish. The immediate threat had passed, but for Alex, the larger, more terrifying confrontation was still to come. That evening, after Leo was asleep, Alex found Samara on the terrace, staring out at the city lights. He walked out and stood beside her, the cold air a bracing shock. I have to tell you something, he began, his voice heavy. And there's no easy way to say it. You have every right to hate me after you hear it. He told her everything. He didn't soften the details or make excuses. He told her about Project Goldfinch, about the eviction notices, about the cold corporate calculus that had valued a luxury condominium over her mother's clinic. He explained how his ambition, his relentless drive for more, had set in motion the chain of events that led to her mother losing everything. The money I have, he finished, his voice raw with shame. It was built in part on your mother's loss. I am the man who destroyed your home. He braced himself for her anger, for her tears, for her to turn and walk out of his life forever. It was what he deserved. Samara was silent for a long time, her gaze fixed on the distant glittering lights of the Goldfinch Tower, a monument to his greed. The wind whipped her hair around her face. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet, laden with a sorrow that was ageless. I remember the day the bulldozers came, she said, not looking at him. My mom stood across the street and just watched. She didn't cry. She just got this look in her eyes, like something inside her had broken. She was never the same after that. She paused, taking a shuddering breath. I hated the people who did it. For a long time, I imagined they were monsters, faceless people in a big glass tower who didn't care about anyone but themselves. She finally turned to look at him, her dark eyes searching his. You're not a monster, Mr. Sterling. You're just a man. A man who made a terrible mistake. And then made another one. Alex flinched. The truth of her words, a fresh wound. My mom, Sam continued, her voice gaining a sliver of strength. She taught me that holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. It only hurts you. She wouldn't want me to live in that prison. She looked from Alex's anguished face toward Leo's bedroom. She would want me to finish what I started here. She would want me to help the little boy. Hating you won't bring her back, but maybe, helping him can honor her. It wasn't forgiveness, not completely. It was something more profound, more difficult. It was absolution. A choice to move forward, not for Alex's sake, but for her own, and for her mother's memory. In that moment, standing on the cold terrace high above the city, Alex Sterling understood that redemption wasn't something you could earn or buy. It was a gift. And he had just been given the most undeserved, most precious gift of his entire life. The confession changed everything. The secret was out, a poison drawn from a festering wound, and in its place, a fragile, honest peace began to grow. The healing was no longer just for Leo. It was a shared project, a quiet reconstruction of 3 broken souls. Alex stopped being just a benefactor and became a partner. Samara was no longer just a healer, but a cherished, integral part of their small, unconventional family. They worked together, their focus singular. The progress with Leo accelerated moving from crawling to pulling himself up. He would hold on to the edge of the sofa, his legs trembling with the monumental effort, his face a mask of concentration. Each time he stood, for 3 seconds, then 5, it was a victory that echoed through the silent penthouse. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday morning, exactly 1 week after the custody hearing that never happened. The air was thick with the promise of snow. They were in the living room, the space that had become their sanctuary. Alex had been talking to Leo, not with the forced cheerfulness of before, but with a raw, unvarnished honesty. He didn't just tell stories about explorers and spaceships anymore. He told Leo stories about himself. "I was so scared after the accident, buddy," Alex said, his voice thick with emotion as he sat on the floor beside his son. Leo was holding onto a low coffee table, his knuckles white. "I was scared that I'd broken you. And I was so ashamed. I think my shame made me forget how to just be your dad. I'm so sorry, Leo. I'm so sorry I let my fear get in the way." He wasn't asking for forgiveness from a 6-year-old. He was simply offering the truth, the last piece of the puzzle. Leo looked at his father, his blue eyes clear and deep. For months, he had been a mirror reflecting the fear and guilt around him. Now, seeing his father's open, vulnerable heart, something inside him finally unlocked. The last gate of his mental prison swung open. Alex picked up Leo's favorite stuffed lion, the same one he'd crawled to a week before, and placed it on the floor, about 5 feet away. A chasm, an impossible distance. "I'm right here, Leo," Alex said, his voice a steady anchor in the quiet room. "You can come get him." Samara stood near the window, a silent guardian, her hands clasped in front of her. She didn't move, didn't speak. This was a moment between a father and a son. Leo's gaze flickered from the lion to his father's outstretched hand, to Samara's encouraging face. He took a deep, shuddering breath. He let go of the coffee table. For a terrifying second, he swayed, his thin body a fragile tower against the force of gravity. His legs trembled violently. Alex started to move, to catch him, but a look from Sam stopped him. "Let him." Then, Leo lifted his right foot. It was a slow, clumsy, agonizing movement. He shifted his weight, his face screwed up in concentration. He placed his foot down on the rug. It held. He lifted his left foot. He took a step, and then another. Each one was a miracle, a testament to a child's resilience, a father's love, and a young girl's profound wisdom. He was ungainly, unsteady, like a newborn colt finding its legs. But he was walking. He took a third, wobbly step, and finally tumbled forward, not into a heap on the floor, but directly into his father's waiting arms. Alex caught him, holding him tight, and the sound that escaped his lips was a mix between a laugh and a sob. He buried his face in Leo's soft hair, his own body trembling. "You did it," he whispered, over and over again. "You did it, buddy. You did it." Leo clung to him, his small arms wrapped tightly around his neck. He pulled back, looked his father straight in the eye, and spoke his first clear, voluntary words in over 7 months. "I did it, Daddy." Tears streamed down Alex's face as he held his son. The weight of 238 days of guilt and fear finally, blessedly, lifting from his shoulders. He looked over at Samara. She was crying too. Silent tears of joy and relief, tracing paths down her cheeks. He mouthed the words, "Thank you." She just smiled. A brilliant, radiant smile that lit up the entire room. Epilogue, 3 months later. The Goldfinch Tower still cast its long shadow over the south side, but something new was rising in its shade. At its base, where a sleek, minimalist lobby was once planned, was now the bustling entrance to the Anya Jones Center for Holistic Healing. It was a state-of-the-art facility, funded entirely by Alex, dedicated to providing free, compassionate trauma therapy for the city's most vulnerable children. Inside, a local news crew was filming a segment. They interviewed the center's director, a respected child psychologist Alex had headhunted. They interviewed parents whose children were finally getting the help they needed, but the heart of the center wasn't in the interviews. It was in a quiet, sunlit therapy room. Alexander Sterling sat on a small chair, watching as his son Leo, walked a little unsteadily, but with a confident grin, across a balance beam. Standing beside him, holding his hand, was Samara Jones Sterling. The adoption had been finalized a month ago. She wore a new coat, but she still carried her old, worn copy of The Body's Echo. She was enrolled in one of the city's best schools, acing her classes, her sharp mind finally given the resources it deserved. "You ready to go?" Alex asked her, ruffling Leo's hair as he successfully reached the end of the beam. Samara nodded, her eyes bright. "Yeah. We're going to be late for the park." They walked out of the center. A new kind of family, forged not by blood but by brokenness, and the slow, patient work of putting the pieces back together. They weren't perfect. The scars were still there, the faint limp in Leo's walk, the shadow of memory in Alex's eyes, the quiet wisdom in Samara's. But as they stepped out onto the sidewalk, into the bright Chicago sunlight, they were whole. They were a testament to the fact that sometimes the deepest healing doesn't happen in a sterile hospital or a gleaming tower, but on the simple, humble ground where one human being reaches out to another and has the courage to say, "I think I can help."